So what I want to do is talk about the relaunch of Fitzbillies. Actually, somebody asked me out there earlier, are you the guy that owns Fitzbillies? And I suppose I should nail that straight off, really. Fitzbillies is owned, the building is owned by Pembroke, as much of Cambridge is owned by a college. And it's been owned by, or it's been run by half a dozen different couples, usually, at various points during its life. Some of them have gone bankrupt, some of them have gone out of business, some of them have been very successful. And most importantly, I guess, it kind of belongs to Cambridge, as you'll see as I talk through this. I had the first meeting with my landlord, who's the bursar of Pembroke. And he took me around for a walk around the college, which is a beautiful place. I didn't go to Cambridge or Oxford or really anywhere else, except a very strange provincial art college. So it was all a little bit sort of jaws open to me. But he gave me this fantastic little chat. I didn't even realise he was doing it, but he was talking about how sometimes he looks at this place, this 500-and-something-year-old college, and he thinks, you know, I'm just the caretaker. And I realise now what he was doing to me was actually that, don't get ideas above your station, sunshine. This place belongs to Cambridge as much as anybody else. So I suppose that sort of gets the ownership thing. But yeah, I run the business called Fitzbillies right now. So how did it take off? Well, I suppose what I really want to talk about is the motivations behind what made me and Alison just chuck in totally acceptable, presentable lives and end up doing this odd thing. And I suppose in the spirit of TED, I've been a big fan of TED ever since back in the day when I worked in ad agencies and had a wonderful time stealing all their ideas and putting them into my presentations and thinking how cool that was. So I also want to try and get across some ideas that I think are quite big in this sector and a bit counterintuitive of things that are going on. I'm a food writer, so I write about food for the national papers. I do a radio program on Radio 4. I do some TV stuff, sort of things like that, write books about food. Also, I kind of, because I have a background in marketing, I also write about food as business. And I try and have that slant on it. It's a very important part of the economy of the country. And so I always try and keep that in mind. It's very difficult for me to actually review a restaurant when I know I'm actually talking about 40 people's jobs, when I'm arguing about how hot the gravy should be. You know, you realise that is a very, very serious thing you're doing. So I try and put that kind of slant on everything I do. And a year ago, I was doing very well at that, really quite happy, poncing about being a food writer. It was great. And Al was doing terribly well as the strategy director of a big marketing group. And that was nice. And then this happened. Stephen Fry. I hope you can read this. I will do it. I can't do the voice, sadly. It would be really useful at this stage. No, say it ain't so, not Fitzbillies. Or I tweeted a pic of one of their peerless Chelsea buns, but a 6 month ago. And there was a link to the local paper. Both Al and I follow Stephen Fry on Twitter, and she phoned me at home at my desk where I was working on a perfectly acceptable and normal piece for the FT, and she said, Tim, have you seen Stephen Fry's tweet? I said, yes, darling, terrible, isn't it? Yes, it's far more than terrible, it's appalling. I said, yeah, but look, you know, she said, we should do something about it. I said, sweetheart, you're a marketeer, I've worked in catering for 10 years, you have no idea how tough that is, don't be daft. She said, we're seeing it in 2 weeks' time. Okay. And you don't really argue with Al. So there were 200 applicants for the job, and we got it. And I'm bloody glad, otherwise it would have been impossible to live with her. Al had grown up in Cambridge. She knew about Fitzbillies very well. Her 21st birthday cake was a croquembouche from Fitzbillies. She'd seen it, she knew all about it, she knew the history, I knew nothing. I had spent the sum total of 3.5 hours in Cambridge in my life before I was the owner of a cake shop. I had, to put it mildly, reservations. As I said, before I went into the advertising world, I spent 10 years traveling around the States working in catering. And I was never a chef, never that poncy. I was a line cook. A line cook works in schools, hotels, prisons, diners, slapping out food for people who need food. And I knew how bloody hard it was. Okay. Bankruptcy. I've spent the last 10 years, like most food writers have, writing about the appalling situation of small businesses in high streets in the UK. The loss of our food businesses right the way across the board, it's criminal. It's hell on the high street right now. Businesses are under pressure, banks aren't lending, punters aren't spending. It's an appalling place to be. I don't know if any of you have ever been involved in a bankruptcy, but when I went to see Fitzbillies for the first time, it was my first encounter with it, and it was like walking into a very sad crime scene. The place was filthy, it was ankle deep in gunge, there was sort of police tape in corners, somebody kicked the front window in. I didn't find out till afterwards when I spoke to some of the old staff that the bailiffs had come in, taken their keys off them and given them 10 minutes to quit the building with all their possessions. And these were people who'd worked there in some cases up to 50 years. By the time we got there, they were already a month down the line. None of those staff were left. It damages staff jobs naturally. Creditors, people were coming in for months afterwards. Cambridge is a small town. If you want to get some guy to come in and put in some stainless steel ducting, it's the same guy that was doing it 10 years ago and 20 years ago. The good part is he knows the building. The bad part is his last bill wasn't paid either. And you start to realize the damage that a business, we employ 25 people. 25 people can take 25 jobs out, but it can also affect a hell of a lot more in a small town. Reputation. Well, as we'll go on to see, Fitzbillies' reputation has stayed pretty good. But it didn't just die overnight. It spent quite a long time cruising downwards. And if you still today look at the appalling TripAdvisor, you'll see 5 years' worth of reports on a dying business. And you won't see many reports on the new one that's taken over yet. We just have to wait for that to catch up. And there's the fabric. The building itself, as a business goes out of business, as it takes time, again, it doesn't just happen overnight. Things get run down, and people don't pay maintenance bills. They don't have people in to fix stuff. Plumbing gets backed up, electrics start to fail, and so on. And you walk into a business that has very, very little left. It doesn't have to be worked on, maintained, and rebuilt. But the awful part about it is you realize that those people who are probably doing the same kind of thing that you want to do were in a position in those last years where you can go in and you can sneer about the horrible beige paint job, and you think, Jesus, how could anybody run a business painted that badly? And then you think, actually, how could anybody close down for 5 days long enough to repaint? It's simply not doable. So, on the plus side, bankruptcy gives you a fresh start. We were able to redecorate, retool, hire new staff, hire back some of the old staff, which was fantastic. Those who hadn't gone on and found other jobs, we hired them back. And we were able to create a marketing strategy from a base state, from a clear slate. And that, for both of us, was fantastic. Earlier this year, I did a documentary for Radio 4 and a piece in the FT on new food entrepreneurship. There are lots and lots and lots of cool people going into food right now. And there are some very interesting reasons behind this. We're in a media environment of public supermarket bashing. Everybody wants to put the boot in on big business, big food businesses particularly. 99% of the time, they're absolutely right. It's entirely justifiable so to do. There is an enormous loss of jobs across the creative businesses. It doesn't really register that highly because a lot of these people are, oh, I'll retire early, or oh, I'll move into consultancy. But basically, agencies, TV companies, all kinds of creative options are shutting their doors, people are being laid off. But they're being laid off before they need to be, and they're being laid off with a load of money. It amazed me when I started interviewing these people that most of the people that were restarting the old businesses had just come straight from other careers. They'd just done this escaping thing. And I keep getting these bizarre phone calls from people saying, wow, you've done amazing things, you've changed your life, you've left the rat race. The last time I had one of those calls, I had my forearm in a grease trap. And there was some food in there that had probably last seen the light of day 10 years ago. And trust me, I was fighting the urge to vomit. I was not living the dream. But the other thing I got to do when I was doing this, Radio 4 are lovely. It's the last place in the world you can actually pursue a story and really, really get into the roots of finding things out. And they said, well, why don't you go and interview some of the people that were kind of the last generation of food entrepreneurs? Some of the Indian and Chinese families who opened restaurants going back into the 40s, 50s, that kind of thing. And they were fascinating. It was absolutely amazing because what became very, very apparent very early on was the reason that people had come over here and opened restaurants was not because they'd come over being cooks in their previous lives and in their previous country. They came over to a country where there was a class system, where there was inherent institutional racism right the way across the board, and there was massive poverty and mistrust of anybody of any ethnicity whatsoever. And they opened businesses that had low barriers to entry if you had a small amount to invest, where you could, by hard work, reward yourself and move on. But the main motivation for doing it was to create a job for yourself and your family, when otherwise they might not be able to get past the class and race issues of finding jobs in the first generation when they arrived. The most important thing about this was none of these guys were looking for an exit strategy. There was no way out of this thing, because actually what it was all about was trying to create those jobs in the first place. If you scroll forward to today, what we've actually now got is a load of people for whom the standard market system has told them they no longer are worthwhile, they no longer have jobs, there's no longer a job in that sector for them. They've got some cash in their back pocket, and what do they need? They need a job that's going to create for them a reasonable lifestyle, possibly something for their families. These are the rewards in themselves. They're not looking for a way out, the job itself is the way out. Now let's look at the market that they've moved themselves into. Napoleon called us a nation of shopkeepers. He meant it cruelly. Sometimes it feels like he wasn't wrong. The average high street business, particularly in the food sector, is massively competitive. Obviously, that's the way they operate. They are quite introspective, and they are embattled. It's a constant fight, and most small businesses see it as a constant fight between each other because they are actually competing on the high street against each other. What's not possible is any form of group action. There isn't a shopkeepers' union. The mere idea is faintly ludicrous. But it does mean that it's impossible to get anything moving as a group that would help us to change what's happening on the high street. There isn't the time or the money or, frankly, in a lot of cases, the inclination to motivate. And when we interviewed a lot of contemporary business owners in the food sector, it was a lot of, well, we've done it this way all our lives, why would we want to change? Something that's a little counterintuitive when you think about a 90-year-old business like Fitzbillies. We have a poor service ethos in the UK. There's an extremely low understanding of marketing. Most small businesses still consider that marketing is about advertising. And if you, like me, spend most of your time repelling calls from local media trying to sell you display ads for something, you realize that that's about where the understanding of marketing stops. For a born marketeer, marketing is actually about everything right the way back to product design, right the way through the way your staff handle and interact with people on the front line, right the way through how you're talked about before and after the experience is taking place. Marketing is soup to nuts, right the way through. That's kind of what's in our bones, Al and I. I also do a lot of food festivals, so I'm traveling around the country doing fora like this, largely with small local producers. And there's a big difference I've noticed over the last 4 or 5 years, which is older producers hate legislation. And the constant moan all the way through is health and safety is killing us. Legislation is killing us. The EU is killing us. You don't hear it from anybody under 40. The young people starting up the food wagons, doing the funky, cool, hip things in food, actually see those people as empowerers. You phone your local EHO, they tell you what you need to do. They don't come in and close you down. It must be very difficult when your family have run a business for 5 generations for some snippy 20-year-old kid to come in with a clipboard and tell you you've got to do it a different way. But when you're new, it's not difficult. Above all, in this climate, local businesses are broke. The banks just aren't lending anything for development. On the other hand, as the program showed, food entrepreneurs have it very different. It feels like a movement. Everybody's talking about these funky, cool new people. Twitter is alive with us. It's great. They're all banging on. Twitter is up there. Please tweet this bit. They are natural innovators. They must be natural innovators because until last week they were working in a TV company or they were a market management consultant or something along those lines. Today they wake up and they're running a butcher's. That's pretty innovative. They see everything from a customer point of view because until last week they were customers. A lot of them are actually highly trained marketeers. When Al said she wanted to do this job, I said, you're insane, you've never done anything like this before. She said, if you remember, the last brand I relaunched was Santander. Okay, maybe you understand a bit about what we need to do here. That makes some sense. Largely unafraid of authorities. Doesn't really worry us. If the EHO wants to send you a DVD information pack that tells you how you've got to keep your kitchen clean, that's not him telling you what to do. That's him telling you what to do. That's great. Thank you. Yes, of course we'll do that. Come on in. Come and see us. Fine. And we're ready to invest everything. Absolutely everything. And that, in this climate, is quite a substantial amount. So my first big idea is this one. I realise it feels daft saying this in Cambridge. When I was in the advertising industry, I was mainly working through the dot-com boom, the latter part of it as it affected the UK, and working with lots of young, hip, groovy, fast companies with guys in Shoreditch with funny hair and micro-scooters sitting on bean bags. Yeah, all right. And doing presentations like this that I'd stolen from TED. Yeah, woof, in there, thank you. And yeah, we've got all that stuff going on in the high street, in the cupcake shop on the cupcake shop on the corner. That kind of stuff's going on. All that kind of fast company thinking is going on. The only difference is the main strategic thrust behind it isn't, let's sell ourselves to Google in 6 months. It is, effectively, all the exciting bit about Silicon Valley in 1990 without the imaginary profits. Because, remember, what all these people actually want for their knowledge, hard work, personal investment, and innovation is a decent quality of life, a nice job, a modest income, and personal fulfillment. And when you're being an entrepreneur, that is kind of something that's really, really tough to compete against. If that's what's motivating them, that's putting everybody else on the street on the back foot. I don't know. Maybe it's not a TED scale thought. Hell, this is a bun shop. Give me a break. I'm trying hard here. Let me tell you about this place. When Silicon Valley was at its height, at its thrusting peak, I wasn't there. I was on the other side. I had followed a waitress that I fell in love with in a dreadful Mexican restaurant in Covent Garden, all the way to North Carolina. Not just the big bits of North Carolina, not the Research Triangle, where it was all pretty cool and happening, not even Raleigh. Woof! No, I went to Elizabeth City, way out on the Outer Banks, a real, as my ex-wife used to say, hell, that's a podunk town. It's a podunk town. And I worked in the Colonial. It's one of the probably dozen or so diners I worked in small towns across the States, often in college towns across the States. And I loved it. Catering back then wasn't fashionable, cool, hip, groovy, or anything else. This place had an amazing social function. You get up in the morning, you start serving food to the farmers going past to go start up their businesses. Then you get the school kids coming in before they get on the school bus. And then you get the mums coming in, and the older people, and then at lunchtime, all the guys from the local law firms come in. That's all fantastic. And then you, in the evenings, the local people come in. We had a local councillor, I remember, who'd forgotten his wedding anniversary. So we put a candle in the booth for him. And we made it all lovely. And he had a lovely time. But basically, what we had was this massive, massive social function. Hobby horse. We've had a food renaissance in the UK that's lasted 10 years. It's been terribly exciting. But what it's given us is as many Michelin-starred restaurants as New York or Paris, but we don't have diners, zincs, little trattorias on the town square or anything like that. America has rediscovered its diners. A magazine called Saviour has done some amazing stuff on making people appreciate that this is the authentic expression of American working-class cuisine, and it needs to be saved and rescued. Did we ever have them? Not sure. I think the most important thing to remember about Fitzbillies is that when it was announced that we were going to be doing this, we started getting letters and emails, hundreds of them from all sorts of different people. When I was working on the building site doing the place up, and yeah, I was there every day in a tool belt doing things to floors and that kind of stuff. People would come in, old people, sometimes in tears, genuinely in tears, because the buns were coming back. I still feel embarrassed about this saviour nonsense that I occasionally get billed with. But people feel that, and you cannot deny it. It's an amazing, amazing experience. So now what happens is we've started to open, and we're getting people come in with their kids. They're saying goodbye to their children because if they pass this exam, they're going away to university. And we have tiers 5, 6, 7 times every weekend. Then at graduations, we have the opposite. Have incredibly happy people coming in because their kid has just got a degree at sodding Cambridge. Come on! Any parents out there? Woof! Yes! I mean, how good is that? Couple of relationships started in there. I mean, there was some serious face chewing in the back booth yesterday. And then there was the guy with the broken nose 3 days ago who was in tears because his girlfriend was dropping him. She was beautiful. He just had a broken nose. I don't know what he'd done. Maybe she'd broken his nose. What can I tell you? We had a pregnant woman come in for dinner last weekend. And she was huge, bless her. And her husband had phoned ahead in advance. He said, I'm a little bit nervous about this. It's the night really, well, basically it's supposed to be tonight, but it's not going to happen. So can we come to dinner? It's a last minute booking. Do you have a big table? Yeah, we wheeled her in. It was lovely. She had a lovely time. As she went out, she said, next week, once it's been born, I've got it in the pushchair, I'm coming in for coffee. Whoa. I mean, come on, that's fantastic. That's just an awesome way of being involved. And of course, this is Cambridge. So those 3 shabby-looking sods sitting over there in the corner stealing the broadband could be the next Alan Turing, Stephen Hawking, John Cleese, I don't know. But they're all there, and that's what we fitted into. The attraction for us, what made us pack it all in, it was nice to get some stuff in a fire sale. It was nice to have a brand to play with. But the most important thing was there's a Fitzbillies-shaped hole in this community. We're used, as marketeers, to creating consumer desire. What we're doing here is we're meeting expectations born of nostalgia. As an example, I had a woman in, she came in a couple of weeks ago, and Al took care of her. She wants to complain. Doesn't happen very often. And Al sat down with her. Al takes these things very emotionally. And the woman said, "What have you done to the place? It's appalling. It's terrible. You've torn the heart out of it." And Al said, what have we done? She said, "It used to be so bijou, so perfect, so tiny, so English, so classical. Everything about it was lovely." And I said, I can't understand. I mean, what could we possibly have done? And this conversation went on for 5 minutes. The two of them in tears. At the end of it, Al thought to say, "Well, when was the last time you came in?" You're ahead of me, 1956. You've got to work with people's belief about what is there. But at the same time, give the customers what they want even when they don't know what they want yet. We don't change the recipes. Get this into your head, because if you go outside and say anything else, I will personally hunt you down and kill every last one of you. We don't change the recipes. However, at some point during Fitzbillies' history, corners may have been cut. Occasionally, margarine has been substituted for butter. The eggs weren't free range. Some of the flours have changed over the years, so we now have better quality flours if we know where to look for them. They're all organic. We don't talk about that. I just think it should be. It's not something we bother to advertise. So actually, what we're getting back to is the stuff that they would originally have had in their memories. There is no point in trying to tell people that we're changing the recipes and improving them, because we're not. We're not doing that. That's the kind of thing, the kind of way you have to respond to a brand problem and a brand situation like that. And to keep a business going, the other thing you need, this is what we bring to it. Because this has to be a protectable business. We have to make a living. We have to be able to keep people like Jill, the head baker, who worked for Fitzbillies for 40 years. Tom, who's been a career baker since he came out of the Paras at the end of the Second War, and is now 85 or 86, he doesn't know. He doesn't keep track anymore. We've got Kirsty, the head waitress, who's phenomenal. Rosie, the chef. We got all these people back in, brought the jobs back in. We recreated jobs around them. Stu, the barista. Stu, who's doing Mandarin next door at Corpus, but is also makes coffee like an angel. Come in for a coffee on a Saturday or Sunday, and you'll get Stu. Honestly, the best coffee you've ever drunk. Phenomenal. Because we can create this, but in order to do so, what we have to do is make it more than just the cake shop. So we've also got the coffee shop, which has to be there to entertain the new generation of students. We offered lunch. We started offering dinner. We do wedding cakes, we do occasion cakes for the colleges, all these things. We just bought a coffee roaster. We're going to roast our own coffee. We published the magazine that you'll see in your goodie bags, Fire and Knives. I put it together. It's a food writing magazine. I put it together. It comes out from Fitzbillies. We don't know what we're going to do next. We have to have a modern 2012, 2021 business behind this in order to keep this whole thing afloat. But to finish up, top of that, what we are bringing to this, and I won't lie about it in this environment because you know what I'm talking about, is strategic planning. The strategic plan is this. Now, the real logicians amongst you will notice that that's not an equation. Fitzbillies, yeah, sharp. It's community, warm. I don't know. I don't know what the next bit is, because it isn't going to lead to vast profits. But then that's kind of not what it's about. It's leading to an extremely rewarding experience for Al and I and our staff, who are now having a much better time than they were in a dying business, and a new generation of young people who are finding, as I did, catering an incredibly exciting and important and involving business in a growth sector. Fitzbillies is about its community. If it's equal to anything, it's equal to the response that you, as the people of Cambridge, have to the bun in your goodie bag when you eat it this afternoon. And so far, that's about all I've got. Thank you.